Hello, Canada Files viewers. This is Aidan Jonah, editor-in-chief of the Canada Files, here co-hosting episode 20 of Canada and Palestine, the War on Zionism. My co-host, Laith Marouf of Free Palestine TV. Laith, thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, Aidan.
All right, Laith, so as always, so much to discuss. Let's start with this strike by Hezbollah on the Israeli military base south of Haifa. Can you talk to us about this?
Well, this was a secret new base that the Israeli military built for the Golani Brigade because of Hezbollah's surveillance videos and so on. The Israelis were obviously rightly worried about Hezbollah hitting their bases. So they built this secret new base for the Golani Brigade. And Hezbollah not only hit it, but achieved a intelligence breach because they knew exactly when the officers of the brigade are having a dinner meeting and hit the barracks mess hall with this drone carrying two Hellfire missiles and also being a suicide drone itself. And according to the Israelis, there's at least 100 or 200 injured officers. So when we're talking about, this high number of injuries within the officers' corps of a brigade, then it means that brigade has lost all its command, are out of the picture. And that's, above and beyond the fact that the Golani Brigade were humiliated on the front lines here in Lebanon and already lost some of their major officers in gun battles with Hezbollah on the border. So this is a huge achievement. It's an intelligence achievement. It's a military achievement. It is also a propaganda achievement. We can almost kind of count it as a mini pager attack situation because of its ability to, breach the security intelligence and eventually target high-end individuals. And given that Hezbollah has promised that this is just the beginning, we should be expecting more of this kind of attack coming.
All right, Leif, but we have to shift to a rather horrifying topic. Let's talk about the strike on the hospital. I'm thinking about the images of families burning alive. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, this is the retaliation of Israel for the achievement, the precise attack by Hezbollah. So within a few hours, this is the vicious bloodlust of Israel being played out in front of the whole world. So targeting the patients' tents outside Al-Aqsa hospital in Gaza was a deliberate act, and they knew that they're going to burn people alive, and they wanted those images out because, on the one hand, that's now their propaganda strategy of the Zionists is concentrated on, strengthening the feelings within the Zionist core in the world who are getting demoralized. And so every time we see a mass killing of Palestinians, the images coming out have two messages. One is to get these Zionists to feel that they are able to commit these crimes unabated. And the second target of this attack and propaganda that comes out of it is to show the world that Israel is willing to commit live Holocaust on television and that nobody can stop them. You see, so this is the reason this is being done. And finally, we can say that because it's clear the Israelis are losing the military battle and have lost it already months ago, the only strategy that the Israelis have currently is mass genocide. And we're entering the last phase of that mass genocide in Gaza. And that is obviously what is the impetus behind the expansion of the battlefield, because everybody knows we're entering this last stage of the mass genocide.
All right, Laith. So on the next front, with the UNIFIL troops, he's thinking specifically about there's some Irish troops and there's other ones as well. Let's talk about that. Israel's targeting of these. They tried to occupy one of these UNIFIL bases of sort, right? Am I correct there?
Yes, yes, they tried to occupy. They injured one of the bases. They fired on the UN soldiers there, but then they withdrew because the soldiers refused to leave. And this is part of why the Irish and Indonesian soldiers are being targeted deliberately, because their governments are refusing to withdraw their troops, number one. Number two is because the governments of Ireland and Indonesia have both made statements critical of Israel and its genocide. They're the loudest, some of the loudest on the planet, and in that regard, although they didn't do much to stop the genocide. But this is a punishment for those governments for even speaking badly about Israel. The other thing about the Irish specifically is that because of the historical connections between the Irish people and the Palestinian people, being both colonized by the British, being both the same policies and leaders that implemented the policies of the genocide in Ireland were also the ones responsible for the occupation of Palestine in World War I and the attacks on the Palestinian resistance at that time in the 1920s and 30s. The Israelis see the Irish people as enemy. Okay, while the Irish people and the Palestinian people see themselves as comrades in arms. That includes, the Irish resistance being trained by the Palestinian resistance in both Algeria and Libya in the 1960s and 70s. And so over the last, 30 almost years, the Israelis have purposefully targeted Irish peacekeepers in Lebanon. They've already killed at least 8 Irish peacekeepers in Lebanon from 1985 till now. And that is the majority, if not all, of the UN peacekeepers that were killed by Israel since 1985. So that shows you the deliberate targeting specifically of the Irish, why it is happening. And I think the Israelis are making another big mistake of theirs, thinking that the rest of the world is going to bow down to them the more killing they do.
All right, Laith. So I also saw some footage in terms of the axis of resistance operations towards Israel in the Golan Heights, occupied Golan Heights. So there's a translation you did recently about Iraqi resistance strike around these Golan Heights on Zionist targets. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yes. So the Iraqi resistance has been focusing more so on the bases in the Golan and the air defenses in the Golan, because this is going to be a focal point for any ground military operations in a situation of a regional war. The Golan Heights are, include the Jabal al-Sheikh or Mount Hermon, the highest point around the area. It overlooks Damascus. It overlooks all of North Palestine, Lebanon, and North Jordan. So anyone that wants to control the battlefield must control the Golan Heights. And as we see right now, the major airfields, the major artillery bases of the Zionist colony have been destroyed in the Golan Heights over the last 6 months, and even more so over the last 2 months. So this we have to put it in the outlook of a situation of a ground war that includes Syria, that this will be a major point of the confrontation on the ground. And the Iraqi resistance and the axis of resistance as a whole is softening the ground for a battle, so there wouldn't be too much difference in the forces, especially that the Israelis at that point will be still holding the high ground.
All right, so it's time to shift to the Canada front, and we have some mega news, and it is a terrible, terrible news, and that is, of course, the terrorist designation, putting Samidoun on the terrorist entity by the Canadian government. You also have sanctions by the Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control. So this is U.S. and Canada jointly targeting the Samidoun Palestinian Prisoners Solidarity Network. They, of course, do invaluable work on the front of simply supporting the prisoners in the first place. They have chapters around the world. They actually, I always like to emphasize to people, they actually have chapters in Iran and other axis of resistance countries. So they're very much a link between the global north and global south. But also they have an eye toward the broader Palestinian liberation struggle. That's really important to understand. They're not simply just limiting themselves to one issue. And they do have an eye to anti-imperialism more broadly. And when I wrote about the targeting of them by Holocaust house father, the Liberal MP, I warned that, look, they're basically the biggest anti-imperialist organization in the country, in Canada right now, right? And I said if they got targeted, it's going to be a dead zone for anti-imperialist organizations. And I think that's where we're heading to because they just weren't defended. I don't know if you saw anything, Laith, but I certainly saw no protests against this. I saw nothing, no organizing, no nothing to oppose this, to oppose the designation of Samidoun as a terrorist entity. And you had the Zionists freak show continuing, demanding it, CJ, Ben Ibrith, everyone, National Post, etc. So, this is these flakes and the liberals, of course, they were just going to do what the Zionists wanted to eventually. And with the chants about death to Canada and the burning of a Canadian flag, these basically were the triggers that they used to push this terrorist entity listing. So, like, can you talk about like your engagement with like Charlotte Cates, Samidoun? Because I've talked about the issue, but I want to think the audience would want to hear what you have to say.
So I read the decision by the US Treasury and the Canadian government, and I read the whole detailed brief. And they're basing the charges of terrorism against Samidoun by claiming that Samidoun is a front to the Palestinian Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP. And they're claiming that Khalid Barakat is the head honcho of the PFLP out in the diaspora. Now, these claims are easily debunked if somebody does any basic research online. And of course, this is why in the situation of this going to court, which it will go to court, the Canadian government and the American government will lose the case, even though that they are doing anything and everything that their Zionist handlers want. So why would this lose in a court? Because number one, Khalid Barakat is not a member of the PFLP, and Samidoun is not a front for the PFLP. And there is many statements, including video recorded statements of the leadership of the PFLP attacking Samidoun and attacking Khalid Barakat in name and calling him a traitor and so forth. So this idea that the PFLP is the one that's behind Samidoun, or that Samidoun is sending money to the PFLP, or that it's a front to it, or that Khalid is a member of the Supreme Council of the PFLP or the command, it's something that is stupid to say. So it shows you the desperation, number one, of the Zionists. Like when they take steps like this that are so stupid that any person, even a child doing research, will be able to, debunk them. they are exposing their how desperate they are, and because they had to, uh, you know, go for Samidoun, they could have probably went for something more substantial that could be somehow. I don't think there's many, but obviously, this is very similar to the attacks on me and or the Community Media Advocacy Center. There's nothing that they can prove in a court, so they do these public, as uh, personality assassinations, or so. Um, it also comes, by the way, with this. I don't know if we're going to talk about it. This National Post article that is, building a case against others in Canada that are critical of the state of Israel.
We will after this. Yes, we will after this. So, in terms of the Samidoun targeting as well, I think something's important around the Canadian Criminal Code. It talks about recruiting in relation to terrorist groups. Well, Samidoun, which is a activist organization, if somebody says people should join Samidoun, have they just violated Canada's criminal code? Right? I mean, this is you do this to Samidoun, and you can do this to any other activist organization in the country. And then you can just say you don't get to operate in the country. And that's how, in your Western beautiful democracy, you can just operate your dictatorship bluntly, right? They can brazenly operate it in that way. Everyone they don't like is a terrorist entity. Every organization they don't like is a terrorist entity. Oh, you can't recruit them. You can't recruit for them. Yeah, that's
The, the funniest part about this ruling and statements by the Canadian government and the Treasury is that they're talking about defunding Samidoun and taking away their charitable status and their nonprofit registration and so forth. But Samidoun is not registered anywhere. It is not a registered organization. It's not like an NGO. It doesn't have bank accounts. It doesn't have a charitable status. I mean, reading those statements, I was thinking, wow, the Zionists are so angry at the charitable, taking the charitable status of the JNF, that they need to make up bullshit. I mean, house father claiming that he's gonna take their registration or their nonprofit status or their charitable status. I'm like, what are they talking about? None of those things exist. This is a community organization that is not registered, that doesn't have an electable board, that doesn't have any bank accounts. Why is the American Treasury involved in an organization that doesn't have bank accounts? The other thing is that Khalid Barakat doesn't own anything in the country. He doesn't even have a car or a house or anything, no bank accounts. So what are they? Why would the Treasury, the US Treasury, be involved? So all of this is such bad propaganda that I mean, it shows us, I think, how deep in psychosis the Zionist elite in Canada and the US and their horrible beachhead colony are reaching. They are just, we're all used to them making up reality. A Jewish European is a Semite. That's already a psychosis moment. But now we're reaching a moment that they're just making up whole realities that, and it's not about something from 4,000 years ago. It's from something right now that is researchable on Google. And on the list of Canadian registry of corporations, it's really bad propaganda. And of course, the left, quote unquote, in Canada is despicable for not standing up to defend the frontline Palestinians that are fighting inside Canada for equality and liberation of Palestine against Zionism. These wackos like House Father are only emboldened because of the inefficiency of the quote unquote progressives in Canada, if there is any chivalry left in all of this leftovers circles in Canada, we'd see them right now demonstrating, shutting down House Father, shutting down the Canadian government agencies that are now charging Samidoun with this ridiculous charge. But I don't have much hope for that. Maybe somebody will surprise me. I hope I'll get surprised and somebody does something useful out of the leftovers in Canada.
Yeah, like I mean, even the concept of protesting the designation itself, right? Taking a step on this, I don't know, it might even just be beyond. Yeah, I like the term leftovers because I don't feel like it's proper to call them left. You can call them liberal left, you can call them leftovers. I don't see them as an actual left. I don't. It's a farce. And again, I reiterate my point. It's an utter disgrace that the leftovers in Canada didn't oppose publicly or didn't organize to oppose this targeting of Samidoun on the terrorist entity. Even just an event saying, against this terrorist designation potential. I didn't see a single event against that. Right? They just laid over and died. That's it. Right? Again, like maybe I'm being too harsh, but I mean I doubt you'd think that.
No, you're not harsh enough, honestly. I try to always not to be too harsh so I can give them a chance to prove themselves. But it's, 30 years of my experience, nobody has proven themselves to be worthy of being called revolutionary within those leftover circles.
But anyways, Laith, let's talk about the true force for Jewish life in this world. Israel's Ministry for Diasporic Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism. To be clear, I'm joking. To be clear, I'm joking. Um, they targeted you and many other people, Sarah Jama, etc., about this anti-Semitism in Canada. Everybody hates the Jews. The Zionists are in danger. In the National Post, 21st Century Der Stürmer is very busy pissing his pants about this utter crisis in Canada, right? Like, what can I say? Can you take us through this just terrible crisis and your role in the horrors of anti-Semitism in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it, being posted by Zionists. They're, kind of feeling victorious after the announcement against Samidoun. And so we have to take this article in the National Post and being released by the Israeli government. It's the first of its kind report. They didn't do something like this for the US, they didn't do something in Australia or EU similarly for this. So for them to target people in Canada that are working on the liberation of Palestine, and for them to put my name as one of the four quote unquote nods of anti-Semitism, as they called it, it shows you how much actually effective the organizing has been for those who are revolutionary in these circles in Canada. So to see how much effect Samidoun has had on a global scale, okay, to see how much the work that I am doing is reaching on a global scale, this is a testimony of success. The Zionist regime and to spend this much time to publish this article, this research, and then to have the National Post and other rags, in Canada to perpetuate this lie, it shows you how much they fear actually the work that we're doing. And I encourage everybody to follow suit. Look, if somebody in the quote unquote leftover or left circles in Canada thinks that I'm doing a bad job defending Palestine, well, show me if you can do better. Clearly, myself, Samidoun, and Sarah Jama are carrying all the weight of defending Palestine in Canada and or as Canadians on a global scale, on a global platform. I mean, I honestly was surprised about Sarah Jama because this is a elected member of parliament in Ontario. She's has severe disabilities. She's already kind of cut off from all the media spaces inside Canada and the world. And just her being inside the parliament as a Black Muslim woman living with disabilities, just her picture and the courage of her defending Palestine under those conditions that she's in has rattled the Zionists all the way to the Zionist colony. So that shows you how actually easy it is for anybody that has principle to shake down the Zionist imperialist structures in the world with simply just being, okay? And that at the same time is a condemnation of anyone that claims to support Palestine that is not doing this minimum that somebody like Sarah Jama are doing that could be so effective. So, glory to the top four in Canada. And maybe they're going to be adding, they're going to be top five and then top 10. And, since this article came out this morning, there's been nonstop death threats coming to Free Palestine TV on all the platforms. There's also another JDL impersonation attempt. They opened a Twitter account with the same name as TV Free Palestine, but missing one E from the free. They're telling people to donate to them, so watch out. But you see, like, this is now clearly a coordinated campaign that includes the Israeli government, intelligence agencies, and the Canadian government and intelligence agencies, and all their assets, all the way from Canada to inside Israel, have now been mobilized over the last 2 days, clearly to go on an offensive against what they see as the main enemies of Israel in Canada and on a global platform like FBTV, Samidoun, Sarah Jama, and what have you.
All right, yeah, Laith. So the other story I wanted to get to is actually one we missed, but it just kind of showcases the general Zionist attitude in Canada. There was obviously the by-election federally. We talked about La Salle et Verdun. You had the vaguely pro-Palestine NDP candidate who lost there. But we're talking about that because the city of Montreal illegally seized these pro-Palestine signs, according to activists. So again, this is the city of Montreal being really, blatant Zionists, right? You obviously talked in the past about Montreal police coming down to heel after Netanyahu was blocked from coming into Concordia, but clearly there's no fear anymore from the city or from really anybody in the Montreal bureaucracy because they're just running amok.
Yeah, and it's the fault of the Arab and Muslim leadership in Montreal. This is the city that has the largest Arabic percentage of any city in Canada or the US. We're talking about over 250,000 Arabic people on the island of Montreal. And there's zero representation for them in the city council, zero Arabs. When we're talking, 250, 300,000 Arabic people living in the island of Montreal out of the 1.5 million, they should have then 1/5 of the city council. That's what it should be. Not one council member, not one, party that is advocating for the rights and positions my community. And that's not the fault of the racist bigots that are in the city council or the police, the chauvinist terrorist police of Montreal. It's the fault of my community that they're not standing up for themselves. If there is 300,000 Arabs in the island of Montreal and they just take on the streets, what will happen to these police forces and or the city council and the mayor of Montreal? They should take their rightful space in the city of Montreal. The city of Montreal should be declared an Arabic city, okay? It should be declared a sister city of Gaza. Okay, this is the minimum if the Arabic community respects itself in Montreal. But we don't have leadership in the Arabic community in Montreal that respects themselves or respect their community. They are all like good house slaves that go run to eat out of the hand of the mayor and or the police and or the Zionists. So, and I think this is what the Zionists are fearing in general, not only in Canada. This is the reason they're targeting Samidoun. This is the reason they're targeting Free Palestine TV, is because they see Samidoun, Free Palestine TV, and a few other organizations globally are the ones that are trying to radicalize the Arabic and Muslim communities in the West, and with them, the quote unquote sleeping leftovers. And they know that if we are successful to even move 1/10 of the Arabic or Muslim diaspora into direct action, then states like Canada and France and others would not be able to send their troops and military to the region here to kind of subsidize the genocide that is being committed. So from this platform, I call on Arabic and Muslim Montrealers to take direct action for them and to say no taxation without representation. And if the goddamn mayor of Montreal wants to, eat out of the bunhole of Zionists, then they should be made to eat feces all the time.
All right, Laith. So we're going to talk now about this propaganda charity, very Zionist one, Honest Reporting Canada. Now, there's some calls for them to be stripped of their charity status. Honest Reporting Canada is probably pretty well known to anybody watching this show. They basically get funded by Zionist billionaires, and they intimidate journalists in the mainstream media, really, who will say anything but maybe acknowledge Palestine's existence, not frame things in enough of a Zionist manner. So there's interesting calls in terms of the charity status, but again, it's just talking about charity status. And I think this problem with the charity status, and I don't mean to demean people like Eve Engler, because I respect their efforts, but look, if the charity status goes, Zionist billionaires are just going to not get a tax break for funding them. I mean, that's where I've always been baffled by this, big heralding of the charity status talk is okay. And what's after that? And it's a very easy response from the Zionists. It's there's just kind of a rampant liberalism in how people want to battle the support for the Zionist genocide, and again, it's people gotta start paying attention to ideology is all I'm gonna say there. Because if you're a liberal, you are ideological already. And it's leading you astray as always. So I'll just leave it there. But your thoughts, Laith?
Yeah, I mean, just the legal costs of all these fights are enormous. I mean, clearly, taking a court case like this is going to cost always between $60,000 to $100,000. $60,000, $100,000 would probably cause a revolution in Canada if are directed correctly towards radicalizing even a few hundred people, right? So, the question, obviously, with all these legal actions and what have you, that many of activists in Canada are refusing to acknowledge is that going to court in Canada to achieve some justice to the Palestinians is as ridiculous as going to court in Israel to achieve some justice for the Palestinians. In the end, no matter what you do or no matter how successful you are in this court, what you are doing is reasserting that supposedly that there is some justice and unbiased legal system in a colonial entity called Canada and or Israel. So the immediate results of engaging the court system of Canada or the US or the UK to get some justice for the Palestinians is actually reaffirming the propaganda that the legal systems in these countries are not colonial and that they can actually somehow give just rulings. So I personally think is as problematic to engage the legal system in Canada as it is to engage the electoral system, which again, people like look at what the ridiculousness of what's happening in the US, where people are like, oh, Kamala or Trump. No, I'm gonna go to the third party, the Greens. Okay, I sure I like the Greens and I like what Jill Stein is saying, but there's no way she's gonna win. And all you are doing is reasserting the theatrics that supposedly there is a democracy in the US, that actually your vote counts somehow, that if I have somehow convinced enough people to vote for the Greens, they're going to win. How childish is this? And, again, we see many people wasting money and time for our communities in these battles that only reassert the colonial structures.
Certainly, and there's a reason why I've been very cynical about, and a good reason why I left Canada in the first place is I just can't look at and with trust and take them seriously in terms of the activism that's been perpetrated so far for Palestine, because I firmly believe that a majority of it is for the consciousness. Now, like I'm talking about the conscience of people rather than the actual support for the liberation of Palestine. Obviously, Samidoun is a very clear example of actually acting in for the liberation of Palestine. That's why they got listed as a terrorist entity, right? It was very clear retaliation for that, and it was because they actually had some effect. They were probably arguably the only effective mass organization in Canada, and they weren't terribly big, but again, they were actually effective. And again, it's a dead zone. It's a dead zone right now, and look, I think there needs to be two things, which is shame. First of all, people actually have to take it seriously how badly they failed. And secondly, how do you do better and how do you escalate rapidly? We need new organizations in this country for activism desperately in Canada. But again, I don't have too much energy when I talk about this. When we first started doing the show, like, I would always look and dig to see what the activism was being done each week, but eventually we just kind of stopped talking about it too much because it didn't change, and then it just kind of declined over the summer, right? Like genocide just goes on summer holidays, right? And it just the tactics don't change, and now Samidoun's a terrorist entity. That it was like it's in terms of protests, it's been a year of lost time really, in terms of Canada. I mean, like you have the U.S. now. I think it's called Unity of Fields now, but they used to be called Palestine Action U.S. They did stuff actually. People like Hal Walsh really put themselves on the line. That's respectable. Palestine Action UK has done a bang on job. They've really hit things hard. And they've forced shutdowns and they've made things hell in terms of factories and so forth, which is again standard. But in terms of Canada, it's nothing. So that's why we don't really talk about it much anymore, because it's just, oh, are we just going to talk about the same thing? How many times am I going to tell you, Laith, about the same people marching for a couple hours on the weekend, right? Israel is doing genocide. It's like, yes, we know. And, and, and there isn't anything after the end, except for Samidoun. They got listed as a terrorist entity.
Yep, yep. And I think maybe, maybe as the Israeli and Western governments go on this rampage against effective organizers, maybe we will start seeing things go underground. And I think this is where the Zionists and the imperialists are again shooting themselves in the foot because once organizing goes underground, it is going to be a much bigger threat to the imperial order. And I hope that I'm right and things are gonna go a different direction in the next few months.
Well, they certainly can't stay in the same direction if anything is going to change. So I think we're on the same page there, Laith. Now, there is one last story I want to mention, which of course just shows Canada's continual depravity. Uh, this deprived nature of Canada. So there's an article from the Maple. Global Affairs new quote unquote non-lethal Israel exports claim was hollow. So again, there's just this garbage motion in the spring, much exalted motion in the parliament. Such a victory for Palestine, except for it makes the government do nothing, and there's been no benefits from it. And it complained about the Palestinian resistance, and it didn't even force Canada to commit to the liberal two-state solution nonsense, which actually I saw you talk with Khaled Barakat about organizing against that in the 90s, 2000s, and so forth. Even the Oslo nonsense, even that isn't being pushed along by this motion. So I think it's probably a good place for our ending discussion, Liv, because it's the uselessness of the parliament in Canada for political change, right? The NDP, I see the NDP as soft Zionist. I mean, I see the Liberals are open Zionist, the Conservatives are open Zionist, the other parties are open Zionist as well. I mean, look, I have to say this honestly, like people need to understand how deeply problematic thing is right now. Communist Party of Canada still talks about a two-state solution, right? Your revolutionary quote unquote vanguard party, right? Currently talks about a two-state solution, right? That's a disaster, right? That is a great summary of the state of Canadian politics, right? I don't know what to say other than the parliamentary option is useless, and we seriously need a new revolutionary party in Canada. And if people from the Communist Party of Canada get mad for me saying this, get your two-state solution support gone. Palestinian liberation all the way. I won't have anything to say there anymore. But
Yeah, it's pretty weird. It was also weird, seeing for a long time all those Trotskyist groups, not this Communist Party, but the Trotskyist groups, talk about the Israeli working class and
yeah,
how the
who
Palestinians.
gives the hell with the Israeli working class? Who like
So,
these are the active
so
like, good soldiers of
yeah.
the colonialism, right? Against Palestine. Who gives a damn?
So I see that there's so much uh, empty space left uh, for people to grow something new because of the old supposed progressive groups have
And media. And media,
and media.
right? You know, the
Yeah,
Capitals is doing that work on the media front. So
exactly, because the space is now wide open because so many abandoned their position, let's say politically and or media, and because there is no opposition, now there's a huge space. It is a moment that a lot of things can be born and or can grow rapidly if they uh, stand by a defensible, principled position like the liberation of Palestine. And so I think if there is some people, the younger people especially, because it's hard to change, things that are set in stone. right? Somebody that's been conditioned for 20 years or 30 years to be an obedient person and or stay within the limits of this quote unquote two-state solution or this or that or anti-Palestinian resistant or anti-armed struggle or whatever it is, it's not going to be easy to change their mind. But we have hope in a new generation that hasn't been sullied yet by the propaganda from the Zionists and by the failures of the generation before them that could be giving them bad options or bad advice. So the new generation of Canadian activists that are not associated with this old have the ability to dream. Okay.
In terms of dreaming, people really need to understand this in simple terms. Canadians of my generation, remember I'm 23. Canadians of my generation and younger, you live in a bourgeois dictatorship. Never forget that you do not live in a democracy. Do not let anybody lie to you, tell you it's a democracy. Look at the action, look at what's demanded politically, look at how it never happens. It can be expounded in so much more detail other people have. Here's not the space right now. But you live in an outright dictatorship and you need to dream outside of it, think outside of it, develop new, even theories in response to the current political situation, adapt theory from outside of the world into Canada. It's urgent. It's urgent, and you need to not be drawn into the same old liberal nonsense and the genuine, almost frankly irritating calls for appeals to democracy and human rights and this crap that Canada has never given a damn about.
Yeah, you said it perfectly.
All right, Laith. So we're gonna leave it there. So Canfil's audience, thank you very much for making it all the way to the end of this episode. If you appreciate the journalism and analysis done by both Free Palestine TV and the Canada Files, please go and donate to both of our outlets. Or if you've already donated, please just go ahead and spread our work even further. And so, Laith, thank you as always for being this show's co-host.
Talk to you soon, Aidan.
Okay. Talk to you soon, Laith. Goodbye, everyone.